All right, today we're going to tackle a puzzle that honestly plagues so many companies. Why is it so hard to get people to share what they know? We're going to unlock the answer by digging into a really fascinating study that cracked this exact problem. So let me start with a question for you. Just think for a second about everything that makes a company tick. Its products, its brand, its tech. What do you think is its single most valuable and yet, kind of tragically, its most wasted asset?
You got it. It's knowledge, the collective wisdom, the experience, the expertise of every single person on the team. This is the real engine for innovation. It's what the famous management consultant Peter Drucker once called the only source of competitive advantage. But if it's so valuable, why are we so bad at using it?
And that brings us right to our first section, the knowledge paradox. We're calling this the case of the empty digital library because, let's be honest, that's exactly what a lot of these corporate knowledge systems feel like.
Here's the paradox in a nutshell. On the one hand, you've got companies spending millions, literally millions, on these super sophisticated systems. The goal is this thriving hub of ideas and collaboration. But the reality? Well, more often than not, these platforms are just silent. They become digital ghost towns. It's like building a massive library where no one ever checks out a book. The knowledge is technically there, but it's just locked away, gathering digital dust. So, how do we actually solve this? Well, a group of researchers cracked the case by doing something brilliant. They decided to ignore the technology, just for a minute, and focus entirely on the people. And their whole solution started with this one crucial shift in how they looked at the problem. They came up with this really powerful idea, the internal customer. The concept is simple, right? But it's a total game changer. If you want an employee to use an internal system, you've got to treat them like a paying customer. You have to ask, what do they actually need? What motivates them? What's going to make this thing easy and valuable for them? You can't just build it and hope they show up.
And to really dig into this idea, the 2008 study we're looking at went right to the source. They talked to 75 employees across Mumbai's service industry. We're talking IT firms, banks, you name it, to find out what they really needed and expect.
All right, so what did they actually find? This is where we start getting the first real clues, right from the people on the ground, about what was really going on. So the first bit of feedback was, well, it was a little confusing. On one hand, you have over 40% of employees saying, yeah, this is strategic, it's important. That's good, right? But then you see this. Nearly 19% had never even heard of it. And another 15% or so just thought it was the latest management fad. That shows a huge disconnect right there.
You know, that disconnect really pointed the researchers to a super important question. What was actually stopping people from sharing what they knew? The survey went deeper to pinpoint the main culprits.
And boom, here it is, the smoking gun. When they asked about cultural barriers, the answer was just overwhelming. It wasn't about a lack of trust or people being stuck in their teams. No, the number one culprit by a long shot, cited by a staggering 62.5% of employees, was just a simple lack of rewards or recognition. People felt like their effort was just vanishing into a void.
Of course, it wasn't just about culture. The investigation also found some pretty big technology hurdles. And what was the top complaint? The system just wasn't part of their daily routine. It was this extra clunky thing they had to do. Right behind that, the system was too complicated and they didn't get enough training. So the tech that was supposed to help was actually just getting in the way.
Okay, so we've got the problems laid out, right? A culture that doesn't recognize people and tech that's just a pain to use. This brings us to the most powerful part of the investigation, the real aha moment that shows what actually gets people to share.
So what's the secret sauce here? I mean, what's the first thing we all think of? Money, right? Just throw a bonus at people for contributing. But is that what people really want?
But here's where it gets really interesting. When the researchers asked if pay should be directly tied to sharing, the answer completely flipped that idea on its head. In fact, more people said no than yes. It turns out, cash wasn't the magic bullet everyone thought it was.
But then, they asked a slightly different question. Should knowledge sharing be part of your formal performance review? And look at this. Just look at the difference. Nearly 73% said yes. So people don't necessarily want a random cash bonus, but they absolutely want their contributions to be formally recognized as part of their job. They want it to count.
And this last piece of evidence just seals the deal. When they were asked to rank what motivates them, what's at the very top? Peer recognition as gurus, being seen as the go-to expert by their colleagues. And what's at the very bottom? Yep, bonuses, trips, and other financial perks. The main driver is social currency, not actual currency.
So, after all that detective work, what's the final verdict? How do we actually crack this knowledge-sharing code for good?
The answer is actually pretty clear. And you know what? It's not about buying the fanciest software. It's all about building a system for humans. First, you have to build a culture that celebrates your experts, your gurus. Second, you've got to weave sharing into the job itself, especially through performance reviews. Third, make the system so easy to use it's a no-brainer. And finally, leadership has to lead by example. They have to walk the talk.
And that leaves us with one last question, something for you to think about. Look around at your own organization, which is filled with its own experts and gurus. How does your workplace find them, celebrate them, and make it easy for them to share what they know? The answer could unlock your company's most valuable asset. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.